All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Phase 2 community workshop for the Benton Street Bikeway study. My name is Nicole He. I am with the City of Santa Clara Traffic Engineering Division. I am also the project manager for this Benton Street Bikeway study. So back in May, we introduced the project to the community and shared some project background and project goals. And tonight, we'll present to you our draft design concept for new bicycle facilities on Benton Street. And I really appreciate you being here tonight. This meeting is being recorded and we will be posting the PowerPoint presentation of tonight's meeting and also the recording on our city project website. I also highly welcome you to connect with us, leave us a voicemail or send us an email with your comments on the project. And also you can scan the QR code showing on the screen to view more information about the project and access our concept survey and provide feedback from there. So tonight's presentation will have some interactive polls, and I'm really excited to hear your feedback on the design concepts. And here's a brief agenda for tonight. So I'll kick it off with a team introduction and then pass it over to Jeff Knowles at Alta Planning and Design to give you a project overview and activities completed to date. We then dive into the existing conditions, which include the corridor parking and collision analysis, and then share with you the alternative concept designs for the bicycle facilities. Then we'll go into the question and answer session where you can type in your questions for us and we will try to compile them and answer them as we go through the presentation. And lastly, we'll wrap it up with the next steps of the project. Next slide, please. So again, my name is Nicole He. I am the project manager for this Benton Street project. Along with me tonight, online tonight, I have Steve Chan, our tram station manager, and Ralph Garcia, senior civil engineer. And we also have our assistant public works director, Michael Liu, and Carol Chariot, principal tram station planner. They provided a higher level oversight for the project. And for this project, we have Alta Planning and Design providing assistance to city to come up with these design concepts. And from this on, I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Great, thanks so much, Nicole. We're really happy to be here. I'm Jeff Knowles. I'm a principal at Alta Planning and Design. We're the consultant transportation firm helping and supporting the city in this bikeway study. I'm joined by my colleagues Ben Frazier and Katrina Ortiz as well. So a little bit of housekeeping. If this is your first time using Zoom, we welcome you. At the bottom of the screen, you should see a participants button there. You can rename yourself if you'd like. First name, last initial is okay. If you want to just use your initials or make up a name, you can do that as well. We're not tracking that, but it helps us to call on you if we get to the Q&A portion of the meeting. There's also a Q&A button, and that will be open through the entire presentation. If a question pops into your mind and you want to have it answered later, if you're having any technical issues as well, you can put your question into the Q&A window, and we'll get to that during the Q&A session. And finally, it's not available now, but down the road, there will be a button for you to raise your hand, and that will indicate to us that you'd like to provide your feedback or ask a question, and then you can come off of mute and ask your question and provide that feedback at that time. So that'll come after we go through the presentation. We'll be doing a lot of polling tonight to make this really interactive. So you're going to hear a lot from me. You're going to see a lot from us with some early concept designs for what Benton Street could look like. But we want to get your feedback on a lot of this information. So if everybody could go open up a separate window and go type in menti.com, menti.com. It's going to prompt you to enter a code. And this is like our poll code for the night. And then you enter 58861972. If your computer screen is taken up by the presentation, you can open up your cell phone and do it that way, menti.com, and enter 58861972. So we're going to do a test to make sure that everybody's able to do this, because it's important. This is going to be really guiding us for a lot of ways that we're going to get feedback from you tonight. So go to menti.com, enter the code, and let's start the first one here. So the first one's easy. We just want to know kind of where people are coming from. So where do you live? Directly on Benton Street in the study corridor? Maybe you live in the neighborhood within a few blocks, a different part of Santa Clara, or maybe you're joining us because you commute on this corridor or you visit friends or family on the corridor. You live outside of Santa Clara. So go ahead. If everybody could go to menti.com, type in the code, and then vote on where do you live. Again, this information is anonymous. We're not tracking you. We're not going to be knocking on your door. This will just help us understand who's in the room tonight. We got one person that lives on Benton Street and one person within a few blocks. If you're having issues with menti.com, type in the chat window. Ben Frazier is standing by to help make sure we can troubleshoot anything. We want to make sure that everybody can use this. All right. Give one more minute, make sure everybody who would like to participate in the interactive poll can do so. This is our test question. Where do you live on Benton Street within a few blocks within Santa Clara, but a different part of the city or outside of the city? All right, 2 people within a few blocks. That's great. All right, we're going to move on. If you had a problem accessing the poll, if you don't know where to go or what to do, type in the Q&A session and Ben Frazier will try and assist you one-on-one. Our plan process, we have 4 phases for this study. The first is phase 1, information gathering and existing conditions analysis. We've completed that work and we're here to share with you some of that information tonight. Phase 2 is developing and sharing roadway concepts. We have very early stage preliminary draft concepts that we want to get your feedback on tonight. Where we're going is that in phase 3, we will take your feedback and the feedback we're getting from different city agencies and commissions, revise those concepts, review them for traffic and parking impacts, and then share that out with the group, with the public. So then that's the reviewing technical analysis and the revised concepts. So you'll get to see these again. And then phase 4 is then we will put this all together in a public draft report that City Council will review and then consider for future action, right? Right now, the study is looking really at these early concepts for the city to make decisions moving forward. Ultimately, whether you support, oppose, or have concerns, City Council is ultimately the decision-making body that will decide how this project moves forward. Our schedule, we're in phase 2 right here. And so here we are at the community workshops tonight. We're going to have one on Benton Street. There will be other corridor studies with other workshops happening this fall as well. We met with the city's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee 2 weeks ago, and we'll be meeting with them as well a couple more times. So this winter, we'll have our 3rd community workshop. If you've signed in and are subscribing to our email updates, we'll let you know about upcoming public workshops. So we'll have one more in the winter of 2024. So coming up in the next couple months. I'm going to give you a quick project overview and then share with you those draft concepts. So the project study area is starting in Dunford Way in the west and going to Lincoln Street in the east on Benton Street. There are really 2 sections of Benton Street that have different characteristics. The first is Dunford Way to Marianne Drive. It's 1.8 miles east to west. It's a 4, sometimes 5-lane roadway with a posted speed limit of 25 to 30 miles per hour. The defining characteristic is that it's 64 feet wide, typically between the curb lines, between the curbs. Then from Marianne Drive to Lincoln Street, this is a just less than a mile, 0.8 miles. It's a 2-lane roadway. It's mostly residential use, and it's got a 25-mile posted speed limit. And the dimensions for that street, it narrows down, and it's 38 feet typically between curb to curb. Some of the things we've done so far in terms of engaging with the public is we've had 2 virtual workshops. We had a pop-up event at Bike to Work Day, where we talked to over 30 people, and this was located near the San Tomas Creek Trail near Agnew. We've also had an online community survey. 114 people have already taken that survey. The workshops were noticed by over 1,000 postcards that went out to folks that lived along Benton Street and then the near area. We had 10 people attend those 2 workshops. We've done site visits. We've collected traffic counts and conducted travel time along the corridor at peak periods. We've conducted parking information and also looked at collision information. So we're going to share the parking and collision information tonight. What are we hearing? The people who we've engaged with are interested in safe, comfortable bicycle facilities that are continuous along Benton Street, improved bicycle crossings at major intersections, connections to the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail, and better crossings of Benton Street at the Creek Trail. And also making sure that we understand the need to balance the parking and traffic congestion concerns of residents with any streetscape design. So a little bit about the corridor collision and parking analysis. We looked at available collision information over the last 5 years, and we mapped that out on Benton Street, and you can see that here. We also mapped this information on parallel corridors on Homestead Road and El Camino Real. There were 102 motor vehicle collisions in the study area at that time. 16 of them involved bicyclists, and 4 involved pedestrians. Thankfully, there were no fatal collisions in the last 5 years on this study area. There were 2 bicycle-involved collisions that resulted in severe injuries. So typically that means going to the hospital. And 33 of those collisions involved speeding on the corridor. In the bottom left graphic, you can see how the time of day correlates to the degree of injury. And you can see those 2 severe injuries in red are 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. So low light conditions, and also you can see that the spread of collisions occurs during the peak commute periods in the morning and afternoon. Primary crash factors for these collisions, as I mentioned before, unsafe speed on the corridor was the primary one, followed by auto right-of-way violations. The city collected parking information as well over 4 days in the last week of April. We collected information on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and a Saturday, and counted the number of cars that were parked on Benton Street, along with all the cars parked on 500 feet of every cross street. And we looked at these during the peak parking demand periods. So in the morning between 7 and 9 a.m., midday between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., and overnight between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. During those time periods, we counted every half hour along all these areas, and this is the results that we found. On the north side of Benton Street, there are 313 legally available parking spaces, and we saw on average 94 of those parking spaces being used. So about 30% of the available parking was used on the corridor. On the south side, 273 spaces with 62 cars observed, so 23%. So on average on Benton Street, you have 586 available parking spaces, 156 typically used, so a 27% utilization rate, which means typically during those peak periods, 7 out of 10 spaces are available. On the side streets, about 29% of parking spaces are used. We map that out as well. I'm sharing this here. You can see the majority of the corridor has low parking utilization or low demand during peak periods, except a few side streets and one section of Benton that I want to call out between Loyola and Las Palmas on the north side, where there is a high demand for on-street parking. This will, I think, factor into the decision-making as well, and we'd love to get your feedback about this information as we start to inform decisions about one of the concepts which would remove parking on one side of the street. So here are the corridor concepts. As I mentioned before, the 2 main characteristics are the dimensions and the travel lanes. There are 64 feet on the main corridor in front of Santa Clara High School. There is a section that I'll get to in one section that's 60 feet wide from Dunford to just about Lawrence Expressway, and then 38 feet from Marianne to Lincoln Street. So first on that 60-foot section, this is from Dunford Way to Lawrence Expressway. Currently, you have 2 parking lanes that are 10 feet wide and very wide, 20-foot wide travel lanes. What we're proposing as a concept, and we'd love to get your feedback in just 1 second, is to shrink down those 20 feet wide lanes, which are really excessively wide, and we can use some of that excess room to create buffered bike lanes. And so you can see here, the parking lane would remain the same dimensions, 10 feet wide. The parking would be 5 feet wide with a 3-foot buffer. You'd have two 12-foot lanes. And yeah, so at this point, I think we'd like to get your feedback about this option for conserving some of this space and using it to create bicycle lanes. So as I mentioned before, we're using Mentimeter to collect feedback. And so if you go to menti.com and type in the code 58861972, then you can give us feedback right now about how you feel about this early concept idea. There's less favorable on one side or more favorable. So we'll give folks a second to take this poll. And then after this, I'm going to ask kind of how you or why, what led you to your ranking that you gave it. So we'll give folks a few seconds to get the results in. And then we're going to have an open-ended question for you about why you selected how you voted. So again, with this concept, you're shrinking down very wide travel lanes. The travel lanes stay the same. You still have one in each direction. You still have the same available amount of parking. It's really just shrinking the travel lanes. All right, last chance. We'll give folks 5 more seconds to get their votes in, and then we're going to move on. All right. So now we're going to ask you why you selected that rating. This is an open-ended response. And so we don't need an honors thesis from you, multiple paragraphs of information, but a couple, 1-sentence response or a couple, few key words about what led you to vote the way you did. And again, if you have more thoughts or questions, type those into the Q&A box, or wait till we get to the Q&A session to give us your feedback. So you might want to jot down your thoughts about this concept for this 60-foot section. Again, this is just from Dunford to Lawrence Expressway on the far west end of the corridor. Great, so some folks are writing in. There's lots of room to do this, provides safer space for bikers. Speeding cars. Okay, good point. One of the things that I should mention is that when you narrow travel lanes, when people have 20 feet wide, it kind of encourages people to speed. And so one traffic calming device the city has at its disposal is just to narrow travel lanes down. And when you do that, actually, just even with paint, it can have an effect on reducing people's speeding behaviors. So somebody else said wide parking lanes keep bicyclists out of the door zone, but I would prefer a buffer between the parking and the bicycle lanes. That's good feedback. Also, the travel lanes are rather wide at 12 feet. Thanks for that feedback. All right, let's keep moving along. All right, Benton Street from 64 feet from curb to curb width. This is from Lawrence Expressway to Marianne. This is, again, a 1.8 mile section. It's got bike lanes, bike through lanes from Las Palmas to Marianne Drive, so a small section to help people get across Santa Monica Expressway. But for the most part, it doesn't have bike lanes. It's got 11 to 12 feet wide travel lanes. There are 2 in each direction. 11 feet wide are in the outside lanes, and 12 feet wide are in the inside lanes. It's also got parking on both sides of the street, so 9-foot wide parking lanes. Some things that we noted, and we've heard in the past from members of the public, that there is a challenge for driveway entry and exit because of the fast-moving vehicles. It's hard for residents to get in and out of their driveways. There's also a bus stop running along, the number 53 runs along Benton Street. Let's see. So the first concept we have is concept 1, reducing the travel lanes. This is creating buffered bicycle lanes and curbside parking. So for this one, we're looking at reducing the number of travel lanes from 4 to 3. You can see here, there would be an 11-foot travel lane in one direction, an 11-foot travel lane in the opposite direction, and a 10-foot wide two-way center turn lane. The benefit of the two-way center turn lane is that it allows vehicles to get out of traffic and queue up to make turns either at intersections or to get in and out of driveways. We've added these. Let's see if I can zoom in for everybody here. We've added ideas for striped buffers at driveways to improve sight lines so that the cars wouldn't be parked right up against the edge of the driveway boundary. This is also a space that could be used for trash receptacles, recycling receptacles during trash day, so that they're also not blocking bicycle lanes. The bike lanes would be 5 feet wide. Let's go roll over. 5 feet wide with a 3-foot painted buffer on the outside of the parking lanes. And so in this scenario, parking would be retained on both sides of the street. Let's see. The other thing I'll mention that at bus parking, there would be a mixing zone. So the bus would still pull across all the way to the curb, and there'd be a mixing area where they would cross over the bicycle lanes. So there'd be some marking indicating this mixing zone here. So this is the first of our concepts that we'd like to share with you. And so we'd love to get your feedback on this one. And again, we're going to go through all of them in turn, so you don't have to pick one or the other. We're trying to get feedback on each of them. So please rank your level of support for the 60-foot, 4-foot wide section of Benton, concept 1. This is the buffered bike lane and curbside parking. Again, it's reducing the travel lanes from 4 to 3, converting and creating a two-way center turn lane, and adding buffered bicycle lanes. Right. Give folks 5 more seconds to get in their thoughts, and then again we're going to go to open-ended comments. Okay. So folks, could please tell us why you voted the way you did about this concept. All right, it's got some comments coming in. One person indicated, excellent concept with a deadly flaw. The parking lanes are only 8 feet wide, which means cyclists in the bike lane would be well into the door zone. Good feedback for us. I think we anticipate that the buffer against moving vehicle traffic where that's located could allow people to move closer to that painted buffer and outside of the door zone, but it's something we could consider, and love to get more feedback about that. Somebody indicated reducing traffic speed. That's why they voted this way. Like the buffered bike lanes, but I don't like that it would promote. But I don't think it would promote safe biking. Okay, we'd love to learn more. In general, the traffic is light. One lane is plenty. One potential partial solution is to reduce the buffer on the left side of the bike lane to 1.5 feet and put a 1.5 feet buffer next to the parking lane. That's an interesting idea. Thanks for that feedback. All right. Keep moving along. All right, this is our second concept. This is reducing the travel lanes again, very similar to the first one, but in this one, we're creating parking protected bike lanes with this idea. Again, this would just be the sections that are 64 feet wide from Lawrence Expressway to Marianne. Here again, you have one travel lane in each direction, a 10-foot wide two-way center turn lane, 8-foot wide parking. But here, the parking lane and the buffered bicycle lane is flip-flopped. So you can see you put the bicyclists next to the curb and you protect them with parked vehicles, a buffer, and some sort of physical barrier as well that would between the parked cars and the bicyclists. And so the idea here is that you are promoting children, novice bicyclists, people who really don't feel comfortable biking right next to moving traffic. They would be closer to the curb and have a more comfortable experience. With this scenario, we've also, zoom in here, we've also similarly kept the striped buffer area so that trash receptacles could be out of the bicycle facility. That also promotes people getting in and out of their vehicle, of their driveway, so they can see cars coming and going. And then in this scenario, you have the bus mixing zone where the bicyclists would be against the curb, but there'd be this buffered area so that bicyclists would be mixing in this location as well. So again, the only difference between concept 1 and 2 is the location of the bicycle facilities. This is a class 4 facility, a separated bikeway that has the protection with parked vehicles and a physical barrier. So we'd love to get your thoughts about concept 2, the parking protected bike lane. And again, the trade-off here is the reduction of travel lanes from 4 to 3 to create the space to do this. All right, 5 more seconds to get your votes in. Okay. All right, and let's go ahead and see what you thought about this concept. We'd love to get your ideas, kind of why you selected the rating that you gave it, favorable or unfavorable. Right, somebody said, I like this one the best, safe biking and a good buffer to protect bikers from cars. Somebody said, expect cars to park in the bike lanes. Yeah, I think that we've seen this one in other cities when they've developed similar style separated bikeways. There is a learning curve, and so cars, vehicles are used to parking right up next to the curve, but with some education and even some, gentle reminders, I think folks have learned how to do this in a way that makes sense. A class 4 bikeway, which is what Caltrans calls this, so we call it a class 4. A separated bikeway with parking is very dangerous when there are lots of driveways and intersections. Cyclists feel safer, but there will be a much higher risk of right hook and left cross crashes. That's something they would have to look at the intersections for sure to make sure there's a lot of visibility at those locations by putting bicyclists so close to the intersection, or sorry, next to the curb. There is that risk. I love it. I would feel the safest biking in this concept, but a small parking buffer every few feet might help. Somebody else said the parked cars block drivers' view of cyclists. I got hit this way. There's the data showing that this is not a good idea. Okay. Again, I think that we'd have to go down to the design and making sure there is plenty of visibility and good sight lines at intersections to avoid that issue at intersections. But good feedback. I appreciate everybody's comments. All right, and another concept that we have for you on this section of Benton Street is to keep the 4 travel lanes, but to add buffered bicycle lanes and remove parking on one side of the street. And we're not here tonight to say which side it's going to be, the north side or the south side. That would happen at a later stage of the engineering process. But this would free up the room to create those buffered bike lanes that would be 5 feet wide with a 2-foot painted buffer. Let's see, what else can I tell you about this? The travel lanes would be 11 feet wide on the outside lanes and 10 feet wide on the inside lanes. Again, if one of the decision makings is to make sure that there is 4 lanes of traffic, this provides that. And the trade-off here is, again, the removal of parking on one side to get those buffer bicycle lanes in. So with that, I'd love to get your thoughts about this concept. So please tell us how you feel, favorable, more favorable, or less favorable about concept 3, which is the buffer bike lanes and 4 vehicle lanes with parking on one side. Again, if you're just joining us, the way that we're getting your feedback is by you going to open up a website, menti.com, MENTI.com, and using the code 5886-1972. That will get you in where we are with the polling information, and you can select your information to give to us. Okay, we'll give folks another 5 seconds to indicate their favorability on this concept. All right. So for concept 3, if folks could tell us kind of how they voted this way. I think wide lanes will make drivers drive unsafe. Same concern as option 1. The parking lane is too narrow. Since the buffer is only 2 feet wide, there are no extra feet to produce a buffer between parking and bicyclists. So just not enough space between that parking space. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? The real question here is whether 4 lanes are really needed. Probably not, but I do not have done a traffic analysis. And I'll remind folks again, it's a good question. Again, we are going to come back to you having done a full traffic impact assessment to show what those traffic impacts would be by reducing travel lanes, having this road diet concept here. So we'll be able to prepare and share that back with you and get your feedback at that time. So that is coming. So that's a good information about the impacts of this. We're not ready to share that yet. So we're really just trying to figure out, are these the right concepts to evaluate? Somebody else said not enough of a buffer between fast-moving cars and bike lanes. Can't imagine eliminating parking at Carmichael Park or the opposite site. I need to work on my dictation quality. Thank you for translating my comments in English. Yep, absolutely. And if anybody wants to expand on these comments, again, the Q&A session is coming up after we get through the next set of concepts. Thanks to everybody for bearing with. There's a lot of content here tonight, and I appreciate you playing with us and responding through the online polls. So we have another one-off concept. This is a pretty short segment. This is alongside the high school. It's from Live Oak to Kylie. Currently, there is 4 lanes of traffic, 2 in each direction, and a center turn lane. There's also parking on opposite the school side of the street. It's a 14-foot wide travel lane, then a 10-foot wide travel lane, 11-foot wide center turn lane, and then goes to a 10-foot travel lane, 10-foot travel lane, and then a 9-foot wide parking lane. And what we're doing to propose here is create that road diet concept, 1 lane in each direction. That would be 12 feet wide, a center turn lane, 12 feet wide. And on the school side, creating a protected bike lane that would be 7 feet wide with a 4-foot buffer. And it's hard to see here, and we're not showing what the design would be, but there would be some sort of physical barrier in that painted buffer, something to keep the cars from parking in the bicycle lane here. It could be posts, it could be bollards, it could be concrete K-rail, it could be a planted median, it could be a lot of different designs, and that will come later if this moves forward about deciding what that design looks like. But there would be some sort of physical barrier here. And then you'd have one lane each direction, and the opposite side would have a buffered bike lane, a 6 foot wide, so a wide bicycle lane with a 3 foot wide buffer, and then 8 foot wide parking. So again, this is our concept. We're looking for your feedback for what's to be done with this section that's in front of the high school. And again, currently there is no parking existing on the school side of Benton Street for the high school. So we'd love to get your early reactions to this draft concept and see how we did. So again, this comes from quite a bit of site visit work and kind of seeing all the bicyclists that are coming in and out from this high school and how many bicyclists are bicycling on the sidewalk because there's no safe space to do so. So this was a concept to create that space, especially a protected space on the school side of the street. So share with us your thoughts, kind of how you thought this proposed concept works in front of the high school. All right, 5 more seconds. All right. All right, I'd love to hear your feedback about this concept. Okay, one person said, I like the concept, but I think the bike lane should be on the other side of the parking space closer to the curb. Okay. A terrible idea to reduce the traffic lanes at the school. Utter chaos twice a day. Nice concept. Only objection is that the parking lane is too narrow again. Fortunately, there are several places where you could steal a foot or two to put a buffer between the bike lane and parking. Thank you. The travel lanes are a little wider than necessary, and the protected bike lane is pretty wide, so you could get feet from both of these. Thanks for that. Bike lane should be closer to the curb. Okay. I think that it's probably related to the one that's opposite side of the school street. Okay. All right, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk now about the section of Benton Street that's 38 feet wide, curb to curb. We're right on time. And after this, we're going to get into the Q&A session. So this is what it looks like today, typically, from Marianne Drive to Lincoln Street. You've got 11 foot wide travel lanes. There are 1 in each direction. It's 38 feet from curb to curb. 8 foot wide parking on both sides of the street. The first concept, concept 1, is no change to parking. In order to create continuous bike facilities, this recommends creating a bike boulevard that puts down these share markings, which is a shared road marking to indicate to drivers that you're sharing the space with bicyclists. There would also need to be other traffic calming elements that would be determined at a later stage. So we're not showing those here, but that's part of this concept. Those traffic calming elements could include speed humps. It can include lane narrowing, neck downs or chicanes. There could be other things like traffic circles. There's a lot of different tools in the city's traffic calming toolbox that would be deployed, but it'd be something along those lines to reduce traffic speeds and traffic volumes to make it more comfortable for people to share the road on this section. So this is the first concept. Again, the trade-off is that there is no dedicated space, so bicyclists are mixing with traffic, but there would also be no reduction of parking in concept 1. So let us know how you think about this section of Benton. Again, this is from Marianne to Lincoln Street. Please indicate whether you find this favorable or less favorable. Okay, we give folks 5 more seconds to vote, and we'll open it up to get your responses. So tell us about this concept, how you felt about it. I think to promote biking and lessen cars, traffic on the road, we need to promote safe biking with at least one dedicated bike lane. Okay, thanks for that comment. So yeah, the first concept does not do that. It's a shared facility. I'm not a fan of sharrows. That's the marking that I talked about, the 2 chevrons over a bike symbol. But your options are limited if you keep parking. So really, parking is the key question. Thanks for that. Any other feedback? Again, if you've got a question or want to provide longer form feedback, we're getting to the Q&A. It's coming up soon. Sounds scary if I were a biker. Thank you. All right. This is concept 2. This removes parking on both sides of the street from Marianne to Lincoln Street. It maintains the 2 travel lanes, one in each direction. And by replacing or removing the parking, that would create space to create 2 buffered bicycle facilities that would be 5 feet wide with a 3-foot wide painted buffer. Again, where there's bus stops, there'd be a mixing zone, green striping to help warn the users of that potential conflict with buses crossing the bicycle facility and parking there to unload and unload passengers. So again, for this concept, parking would be removed on both sides of the street. Our parking analysis, which we shared with you earlier, indicates that there is parking demand, although its average is about 30%, and there's available parking on the closest side streets. So people would park in their driveways or need to use the closest side street to park in the neighborhood. So that's the trade-off with this one. So we're looking for your thoughts about this concept 2, removing the parking on both sides to fit in buffered bicycle lanes. All right, give you 5 more seconds to vote on this one. Share your feedback. And let us know why you voted the way you did. This concept removes parking on both sides to fit in buffered bicycle lanes. I like this idea better, but I've seen a lot of parked cars on that side of Benton. Maybe having parking on one side every so often might be better. Stay tuned. We got an idea for you. Great for cyclists, but I'm concerned about parking. If people are parking on the street and leaving their driveways empty, parking is not really needed, but I'm not sure if that is the case. You will get lots of pushback from the residents who routinely park on the street. Homestead has 4% parking, and we've got lots of pushback on bike lanes. I think it might cause traffic to worsen in some areas because of this. I appreciate everybody's feedback and their ideas. So this is concept 3, and this is trying to blend some of those concerns that we heard and minimize the impacts to parking. And so this is removing parking on one side of the street. You aren't able to get a buffered bike lane, but you can kind of at the narrowest dimensions get in a 5-foot wide standard bike lane, 2 travel lanes that are 10 feet wide, and an 8-foot wide parking lane. One of the other things that could happen with this is that instead of having it all on one side of the parking loss or all on the other side, is you could alternate. And there are some examples, and there's a picture here. See if I can zoom in here, where you can alternate where the parking is available and not, and create this chicane effect, which acts as also a traffic calming device to slow down traffic here by alternating the parking on each side of the street. So maybe for half the block, it's on one side, and half the block it's on the other. But here, again, the trade-off is not having the buffered lane. So on one side of the street, the parking would be against the curb, and the other side would be next to a parking lane. So we're looking for feedback, ideas, and questions about this concept. Concept 3, parking removed on one side of the street to minimize the total loss on the corridor. Are folks able to vote on this one? Okay, there we go. It's coming in. Just got to be patient. Certainly for this one, it's not a perfect scenario, but it's one where we feel like it balances lots of different competing needs for a very narrow street. 38 feet does not leave a lot of room to create a continuous bike facility, but this is one option that we're looking for feedback. All right. So let us know kind of how you voted the way you did. Or within block. I think I might need more information in the Q&A session about that response. Most houses on that street have only one car garage. They need to use street for parking their additional vehicles. Okay, good feedback. Door zone bike lanes again. So a recurring comment. We have lots of chicanes on Wolf Road and everyone hates them. Okay, good feedback. I think bike lanes should be closer to the curb and have the parking facing the traffic. Installing road calming would be nice. Okay. Well, that's the last concept I have tonight. At this, something came in right at the last minute and won't want to shortcut anybody. As long as the parking is on my side, it's a great idea. Not so much if I lose my usual parking spot. Thanks for being honest. That's kind of what we're here to hear from folks. So again, we're not making a decision about which side. That would happen with the public's input in a design phase in the future if this concept moves forward. Thanks for sharing. So we're at the Q&A session where we're going to be answering your questions in the Q&A chat, or you can raise your hand. At this point, I'm going to have our IT team turn on that function. You should see it appear. If you'd like to get in line to share your comments or ask a question, you can do so at this point. There's a raise the hand button that you can now click on, and that will indicate to us that you'd like to come off of mute and share your feedback or ask a question of either the Alta consultant team or the city staff who are here with you tonight. So we're going to go back and forth. And first, let's take a look at the Q&A in the chat window. So I'm going to open that up.
Nothing there, Jeff, but we do have 2 raised hands.
Great. Thanks, Ben. All right, so let me see who's first. All right, first up on my list, I've got Jonathan Blum. Jonathan, if you would like to come off of mute and give us your feedback or ask a question.
Hi, I'm John Blum. I live in Sunnyvale, and I'm a volunteer with Bike Sunnyvale, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. You can hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thanks. I'm the person who sounded like a broken record with the doors on bike lanes. We looked at this pretty closely when we went through the recent decisions on the Homestead bike lanes, and an 8-foot lane really means that doors will pretty much routinely extend into the bike lane. So the best solution to that, I think, is to have a buffer between the parking lane and the bike lane, or you can widen the parking lane. I don't mind taking a few feet off of the buffer to the left of the bike lane, because I think that buffer's main value is not physical but visual, and it remains there even if it gets 1.5 feet narrower. So I did suggest that in some of my comments. I think the parking is going to be a big issue. We counted parking on Homestead. It averaged 4%, and there was a tremendous amount of pushback from the residents. So parking utilization on Benton is much higher, and I think that's going to be a huge issue realistically. I should disclose I don't park there, so and I only occasionally bike there. So I have those are my conflicts of interest. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is the Class 4 lane. I think those are kind of popular because they give you this sense of being protected from traffic by a large 2-ton metal box on your left that makes you safe. But very few of the crashes that occur in bikeways are due to overtaking by cars. They usually occur at intersections, and there the key factor is being seen. And what happens when you have a Class 4 bikeway and a parking lane and an intersection, those 3 things together, it's very dangerous because the cars approaching the intersection, passing the cyclists, will not see them behind the parked cars. And if typically they leave a 25-foot gap before the intersection where there's no parked car, but a car going 20 miles an hour is going to cross that in a second. And so it's not enough room to give drivers the chance to see the oncoming cyclists. And a fast-moving cyclist could easily come out of that spot and T-bone a car as they slow down to make the right turn. So I think that particular combination, parking, Class 4, and lots of driveways, intersections, is unsafe, and that's exactly what that proposal looks like. So that's why I gave that one a 1. I know that's kind of a minority opinion because a number of people said they liked it. Anyhow, thank you for this opportunity to provide feedback. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks for explaining more of your rationale about how you voted. I appreciate that. That's really great feedback for us to hear at this early stage of coming up with these concepts. And so again, we're going to take this feedback. We're going to work to evaluate the impacts of them in terms of parking, in terms of traffic congestion, and refine some of these to bring back to the public. So appreciate you being here. Thank you for your comments. Next up, I see a hand raised for Omar. Omar Hidrogo, go ahead. Let's see, Omar, can we get Omar off of mute? You're free to go ahead and share your comments.
Hello?
Oh, here you go. There you go, Omar. Go ahead. We hear you now.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I guess my microphone wasn't working. Pretty much just kind of a background. I used to bike a lot around these areas, especially because I used to go to the high school down in Santa Clara, resident of Benton Street. And overall, I kind of liked the concepts, but one thing I kind of saw that was missing or seen is that I think in America especially, the car culture is very promoted in terms of like you need your car to go everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I feel like there's a lot of pushback when it comes to biking or trying to use the public transit or using train. Have you ever thought or possibly might want to implement trying to get people to start biking more or look at alternatives to trying to use cars that might actually promote more people to start voting for these, more inclusive biking infrastructures?
It's a good question, and I think the one thing that the city is doing with its master plan is coming up with infrastructure that is connected to each other. So that's the idea, I think, here is if you can actually create more spaces that are encouraging people to bicycle with these facilities, you would get more people to potentially try out bicycling. Do you have other thoughts about the city should be investigating besides building out?
Yeah, I think overall, like, so when I used to go to school, I would say at Santa Clara High, there was a bunch of times where I've seen cyclists, or it would maybe not like a reported accident, scooters, cyclists, or cars driving fast on the side of the road, and you have like a cyclist trying to share the road, or perhaps like bicycle or skateboards, and there would just be accidents or near misses that I don't think would have been reported because they just walk it off. But it seemed to be that when there was wider lanes for cars, even if there wasn't, even if there's people on the side, it still seemed that they would try to skip them or go across them. Right. Sometimes you would see like they would maybe like veer into the middle lane a little bit or into the divider and then try to pass them at a high speed. So I think, maybe making, and especially those larger areas, having like some type of calming, or, how you had the buffer bike lanes and you had the center lane that was turning would be helpful. But overall, I think like, I don't know, maybe spending some time around these really busy areas you can see. Because I recently too, I know they've been installing a lot of lights, especially I think there's, what's it called right here? There's an elementary school on Benton Street or close to Benton. Thing. It's called Central Park Elementary that has been having a lot of near misses. So the city installed one of those perforating hazard lights there. That when you press in order to walk across the street.
Yeah, like a rapid flashing beacon.
Yeah, right. Even with that, right, I've seen, or even with people trying to cross, I've seen multiple times almost, people getting hit, cars not paying attention to the road. So I think a calming measure overall in these busier areas might affect, might be helpful.
Great. Okay. Well, wonderful. Thanks for your feedback. Anything else you wanted to share, Omar?
No, that was all. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
All right, next up with the hand raised.
We do have two in the Q&A box if you want to bounce over there for a second.
All right, let's switch over to that. But up in the queue, Tim, we're coming to you just as soon as I get to some of these questions here in the Q&A box. Let's see what we got. All right. Thanks, Ben. All right, we got a question or feedback from Diane Harrison. Road Benton from home to train station today. Section from Lincoln to Monroe has very wide parking lane, which gives pretty close to a bike lane. So this section could be added to the project pretty easily. Thanks, Diane, for that comment. Let's see it. And then next is from Jonathan Blum. I forgot to mention, I don't think a traffic lane should be wider than 11 feet. It encourages speeding. All right, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for that additional comment. Again, you can type in questions, leave feedback in the Q&A window, or you can raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions about how to do either, the Q&A box is there if you wanted to try and put your hand up or get our attention somehow so we can recognize you and let you speak. All right, Tim, your turn. Go ahead, Tim Logan.
I had two concerns, and one of them was the one that was just brought up. I know your charter is for quitting at Lincoln Street, but you're intentionally leaving a 2-block gap in the bike lane to the train station or whatever. And that's not your charter, I know, but it just seems funny that we're leaving a gap and it's only 2 blocks long. Why don't we go all the way to Madison Street or something like that? Anyway, that's not your charter. I understand that. My major concern, of course, is traffic. I live 1 block off of Live Oak Drive. It is chaos to get in and out of Live Oak Drive at the beginning, at school times, in the morning and the afternoon. I think losing a lane of traffic there is a very bad idea, just because the chaos that's already there will only get much, much worse. And I think you really need to do your due diligence and and announce your plans to the school population and see what your feedback is from them. Maybe I'm wrong and the bikers should prevail, but right now, talk to the teachers, talk to the students, the parents who are dropping their kids off. They drop them off on Live Oak and they walk and they drive. It is chaos already. You're going to make it worse. That's my concern.
Well, I appreciate that, Tim. And we are speaking directly to the school community, and we'll continue to do so, but appreciate that. We will definitely make sure and make sure that they're invited and share with them the results of the traffic impact analysis, which is coming up next. So stay tuned for that, and we'll have to get additional feedback once we have those results to share. I appreciate you being here too. All right, at this stage, let's see. It's just past 7 o'clock. We have nobody else with their hand raised and no other questions in the Q&A window. Here's what I'd like to propose. I'm going to share with you about next steps, but staff and Alta consulting team could stick around. We have the time until 7:30. If anybody would like to stick around and ask more questions, we can do so, but I'd like to let people, if they'd like to get on with their evening, go ahead and do so. So in terms of next steps, there is a version of what you took tonight, a concept survey. It's posted on the project website. You can go, you can use the QR code here, or you can search in the city's website for Benton Street Bikeway study. It'll take you to the project website. You can take the survey. We have a community meeting on September 23rd. So if your neighbors, anybody that you know couldn't make this meeting tonight, we have that available. That's a Saturday, September 23rd, where people can join a very similar presentation. The same slides will be given. If you were here tonight, you don't need to come back again. It's the same information. But again, if you want to help us get the word out to anybody that couldn't make it tonight, there's a second opportunity to be part of this forum, September 23rd. We'll also have 2 pop-up events. We're going to have one on or near Santa Clara High School to hear directly from students, from parents, from teachers. We'll have a booth set up to share this information, get feedback. We don't have a date yet, but we'll let folks know about that once that's scheduled. We'll also be at the Santa Clara Art and Wine Festival at Central Park, September 16th and 17th. We hope to see everybody there at the Art and Wine Festival. We'll be collecting information with the broader public as well. So additional ways you can involve. Take the survey online, invite your friends, neighbors, family members to join us at our second public workshop, or come to any of our pop-up events. Again, as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the project website. We have a third community meeting where we will have the draft plan. That's where we're going to get your feedback about the impacts and also help us come up with a preferred concept. So that will be really ranking the choices once those are refined and giving the city council, the public's ideas about which should be the concepts that move forward. That will be coincide with a BPAC meeting, and the draft plan period will be available for review, and then we'll go to council this summer for their adoption of the plan. Again, our website is santaclaraca.gov/bikeped projects. You can send us an email if that's your preferred method of communication, bentonstudy@altago.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail message, if email's not your thing, call 408-381-4240. Leave a voicemail. We're transcribing those and entering those in the record. We don't have the capacity to respond or give you a call back, but please leave us your feedback that way and attend our future community meetings and other engagement events. And with that, I just want to say thank you for carving out time in your evening to join with us this evening. We're going to stick around for folks that would like to continue to have a conversation with us. If you'd like to excuse yourself at this point, we just want to give you our gratitude for joining with us, and we hope to stay engaged in the future phases of this study. So thank you, everybody. I see hands up. Let's see, Steve Chan. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, that's fine. Well, just wanted to recognize, appreciate you here. Steve is here, transportation manager for the city. Thanks, Steve. The hand raise function is working. He's just testing our capabilities. All right, John, Go ahead.
Jeff, you look familiar to me. I think you were involved in the Homestead project as well in Sunnyvale. Was that right?
Probably some of my colleagues, but our firm was involved in some of the study that helped inform that study as well.
I heard you at some point. I'm not sure when. I went for a 15-mile ride in Sunnyvale today, mostly on Fair Oaks to see what it was like. And in that 15 miles, I almost got doored once. Fortunately, I was outside the door zone, but a guy threw the door open right in front of me. And I picked up 28 sharp objects in the bike lanes, which were all places that that get regularly swept by Sunnyvale. And so I think, the door zone makes me worry, but another issue with class 4 bikeways is how are you going to clean them? And some of them do accumulate a lot of debris and glass and stuff, and that can become a hazard on its own. So I think if I'm not at all keen on that class 4 thing as you saw, but I think if it's considered, there should also be some thought given to what's going to sweep it, and that's actually a complicated issue because those narrow dedicated street sweepers are very expensive and come from Italy, and it's kind of an issue with it. Has not been solved as far as I know. I did want to comment again on the parking. When we looked at the parking on Homestead, the city did a series of surveys, 5 different nights at half-hour intervals, just as you described. And again, the parking utilization on Homestead was much lower. But the objections from the residents were quite vehement. And what it really turned out was that on occasional nights, if someone had a party, they would have to park around the corner on a side street. But then most of the time, there were very few cars in the part-time bike lanes on Homestead. But just even for those nights when people had a party, they really valued that parking. And I think if there are 30% on the street now, unless everybody's parking on the street and totally ignoring their driveways, that's really getting rid of all that parking is going to be kind of a no-go politically. That's just based on my experience with the Homestead project. The other thing that we did that was, I think, a little novel was we counted all the parking spaces in people's driveways. And then I went out on 4 nights and I counted how many cars were in each of those driveways. So I calculated both the utilization, but more importantly, I was able to calculate what fraction of driveways were full. In other words, how many people didn't have any more spaces left in their driveway, and therefore, if they got one more car, they'd have to use the street. And the answer was about 5%, which is pretty low. So we were able to determine that there really was adequate parking in people's driveways, except if they had a party. And I think that was an important finding that's not part of the usual surveys, but is a methodology to consider. Again, if you've got 30% on the street, I have a feeling that there are going to be some full driveways.
I appreciate that. Thanks for those additional comments, Jonathan. I appreciate the insights from your experience with the Sunnyvale Homestead Road study. Let's see, Omar, additional comments? Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Awesome. Let's see. So, I wanted to ask, have you guys had any or have looked at any European counterparts, perhaps any big cities in Europe, how they have their biking infrastructure, and try to perhaps implement that around Benton or in Santa Clara?
In what regard? Do you have any examples that you want to share?
Yeah. So, for example, Amsterdam or parts of Netherlands that have almost kind of an extra sidewalk for bikes. There'll be a sidewalk, and then right next to it you'll have bikes, and then after that you'll have your parking. And my time over there, I saw that I feel like the average person was biking more, and I saw a lot less cars, and I felt more like I was able to bike here. I biked sometimes around Homestead Road, but to be honest, I usually use the curb because I don't feel very safe biking right next to cars that are going, I think it's 40 miles an hour in most of the areas from Homestead, from Kylie all the way to Lawrence. Is there any I think ultimately I also think if we promote healthy bike infrastructure and places that are safe, more people are going to want to do it. But do you have any way of trying to tackle that, or perhaps like showing other people and be like, hey, look at this city, great city that has like, you know, millions of bike roads or whatnot?
It's a good idea. It's something that came up maybe originally when we were looking at the city's bicycle plan. I think that the trade-off with that, and what I think Omar is talking about here for folks, is kind of widening the sidewalk space and having a sidewalk level separated bikeway. So this is similar to this class 4. Instead of using your parked cars to separate it, use the curb. So the bicycles are the same height as the sidewalk, but there would be dedicated space for people walking, dedicated space for people bicycling. The problem with that is just cost. It just becomes incredibly expensive to rebuild the curb and elevate the bike lane. That was the major determinant that we've not proposed that in this, just based off of what we think the city would have access to in terms of funding for this project. But it is something that we could bring back to the city staff and to evaluate if this is something that we want to look into further. And Nicole, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything about this idea about this sidewalk level, like, so that's something that the city staff have evaluated, or something we want to take back and consider.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. Yes, like Jeff said, I think the main driver is the cost. You know, moving the curb and the gutter will be much more expensive than just adding the buffer bike lanes into our existing right of way and curb to curb width. But I do appreciate, and I can see, you know, we need to do more to encourage modal shift into active transportation. It actually takes more than just infrastructure. It takes education and other engineering measures. So, you know, we are actively looking into different ways to promoting that throughout the city. I think, Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry. John, do you have another comment for us? See your hands up.
That was another accident. Sorry.
That's fine. And I see Steve, hand is up. Is that an accident, or did you want to say anything?
Actually, I do want to speak this time. So
All right, go for it.
In response to Omar's question, we are considering class 1 facility, basically bike lane as well as a pedestrian path on the sidewalk level, as Jeff and Nicole mentioned. That's extremely expensive. Not only are we extending the essentially sidewalk out into the road, we actually have to reconstruct the road as well. Well, because the typical roadway is crowned. When you extend the sidewalk out, now the curb ends up being much lower compared to the roadway. So you need to lower the entire roadway to gain back that curb height that you originally had if the sidewalks were on the narrower side. So in totality, I think that cost is just so much that you know, in terms of implementing bikeway facility, it becomes extremely expensive and not very fruitful in terms of getting miles of bikeway facility constructed in a timely fashion.
Steve, thanks for that additional thoughts. Omar, some of the areas where I've seen it done well is when private development is redeveloping the frontage, and there could be space on the right of way could be extended kind of in front of the building side. So not sort of encroaching out into the travel lane, like Steve mentioned, which would create reconstructing the whole road, but moving the other direction towards the private development side to extend and widen that space to put bike facilities there. That's something that I've seen other cities do through specific plans. It's kind of a longer term vision that can happen through the redevelopment process. It takes time. It's like kind of a generational shift. That's something that something could be considered. So I appreciate everybody's thoughts and conversation. Okay, let me just check the Q&A box, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay, no questions there. No hands raised. Okay. Last chance. Anybody else want to share thoughts? Go ahead, Omar.
Sorry, I promised the last one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask too, and overall, like, what have you seen, or have you, or is the city trying to actively lower transport measures in terms of like, if you have a car that transports 4 people, it's a lot of space, rather than if you have a bus or like a bike, which is probably, maybe like a quarter size of that car. Has there been any feasibility studies of how reducing car traffic to perhaps like a bus or something like, or a bike or a cargo bike, right, with 2 seats that could affect, areas that are super congested in like residential neighborhoods or near schools?
That's a good comment, Omar. I'm still pretty new to the city. I don't think we have that feasibility study done. I think, Steve, do you want to add anything? I see your hand raised.
Not specifically a feasibility study, but we are focusing on transit-oriented development in the city, where we encourage developer to construct high-density housing without reliance on motor vehicle as the primary mode of traffic. By design, those transit-oriented development don't provide plentiful parking within the project or on the street frontage to encourage future residents to utilize transit, walking and biking. And that's how the city have thus far tried to make that shift away from vehicle travel mode in the city.
Okay. Let's see. At this point, our IT team could do me one favor. If you could promote Steve to the panelist side. I think at this point. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Kaz. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate your time being here tonight. The conversation's been really wonderful. We've gotten exactly what we're looking for out of this to get people's feedback about each concept. Again, where we're heading is evaluating the impacts and coming back to the public, coming back to you to get thoughts about each of these concepts one more time before taking this to council. So with that, I'd like to see if we could stop the recording and let our attendees, our participants, go on with their night, and we'll keep the panelists around to wrap up. Thanks everybody for being here.